Welcome to the Chrisman Commentary Daily Mortgage News Podcast. I'm your host, Robbie Chrisman. Topics on today's episode include chatter from the Western Secondary, my interview with Better.com's Kevin Ryan on how companies are driving growth and operational momentum through AI adoption, channel expansion, and Fintech product innovation, and why a Fed cut in September is fully priced in. Thanks to today's podcast sponsor, ICE. ICE has and continues to transform the housing finance and homeownership experience. By seamlessly integrating best-in-class solutions, ICE optimizes every stage of the loan's lifecycle. As the standard for innovation, artificial intelligence, efficiency, and scalability, ICE is the technology of choice for the majority of industry participants, defining the future of homeownership. Learn more at mortgagetech.ice.com. About 25 miles to the north of the California MBA's Western Secondary, where I am to start the week, say hi if you see me, a mobile robotic micro factory is building fire-resistant homes in Palisades fire burn zone. The repercussions of disasters is certainly a topic here in the hallways at the conference, along with the eventual fate of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, which may include merging them. Follow the money. Both have enormous backing from hedge fund investors, so much of the proceeds of a stock offering would go to wealthy financial backers, not taxpayers. Tech is also a topic. AI in the capital markets? Yep. SunWest Mortgage Company and its affiliate, Celligence International, creators of the advanced angel AI technology, set up SunWest Investments Trust and a strategic expansion of AI-powered mortgage-backed assets into international markets, beginning with Japan. Shifting gears slightly, a week ago, the Trump administration fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics after revised data showed unemployment on the march in a way not seen since the pandemic. Add to that stirring inflation and anxious consumers. Fortunately, things have settled down over the past week. Lead traders are out of the office en masse for summer vacation, seemingly instructing their understudies to buy and sell U.S. 10-year treasuries at 4.25% and 4.20%. And equity, respectively, and equities posted their best week last week since June, driving the NASDAQ to all-time highs and the S&P closing on the brink of a record. The market has settled into a very familiar trading zone with 10-year treasuries at 4.25% and 2-year T-bills near 3.75%. Both of these levels are consistent with the Fed that is readying to resume normalization next month and a backdrop of cooling, but not shrinking, economy. The Treasury market, recently in a low-volume summer lull, is now preparing for a critical test with the upcoming Core Consumer Price Index release. For today's interview, I want to welcome back to the show Better.com's Kevin Ryan to talk about how companies are driving growth and operational momentum through AI adoption, channel expansion, and Fintech product innovation. He's president and CFO at Better.com and was previously managing director at Morgan Stanley. His skill set includes customer service, public speaking, training, strategy, business strategy, and more. And Better, as many of you know, came out with its earnings last week, so I wanted to talk to him about them.
A lot to discuss, actually, and I'll keep it high level. I'll let you get into some specifics, but there was Better in its quarterly results highlighted a strategic shift and some operational improvements. There's a 25% year-over-year increase in funded loan volume, a 37% rise in revenue. Maybe kind of broadly speaking, what has allowed for these good results that you've observed in the broader mortgage market?
Yeah, sure. So I think a few things. We have marginal improvement in the operating environment for mortgage. So marginal improvement. Rates are a little bit lower today, but not a lot. Most of our growth has been a function of, we've had a 3-year down cycle, 3.5-year down cycle in mortgages now. We just keep investing in the technology. So investing in Tin Man, investing in Betsy or agentic AI, just investing in the customer experience, and then automating and investing such that our cost to manufacture a loan is lower today than it was just a couple of years ago. And so what that does is that frees us up to spend a little more time and money on marketing. And there's some different channels of marketing or distribution channels, and grow and take market share in an environment where the industry is kind of flatlined, hopefully getting better. Maybe we'll get some cuts in September. Let's see what happens. It does feel like the economy is slowing down a little bit. A little bit of slowing growth is actually good for us. Hopefully we'll get some more kind of housing supply out there and things will get better, because that will clearly help us and all our competitors. But it's really been some of just the self-help actions we've taken and self-investments we've made have allowed us to kind of grow when the industry's not growing.
Yeah, and one trend that really stood out to me is your surge in HELOC volume.
Yeah.
I think second lien volume was up like 166% year over year or something. And I've heard, and Grant, take this with a grain of salt, because much like people in the non-QM space were saying, non-QM is blowing up for the last several years, whether it was or wasn't. In the HELOC space, I've heard a lot of companies say it's the overwhelming majority of borrower demand or transactions are happening there. And so I'm hoping you can talk about the industry's strategic shift toward that kind of borrower demand for it, why companies are doing themselves a disservice if they don't have one of those products, and your strategy surrounding second liens are better.
Yeah. Look, to me, it's the perfect storm product. So you've got a couple different macro factors going on. You've got people with first lien mortgage rates sourced in 2020, 3%, right? Let's just pick a nice round number, 3%. Then you've got a home price over that same time period, even though home price appreciation has moderated, is up 50%. Nice round number from what it was worth just 4.5, 5 years ago. You have consumer savings rates materially down versus 2020. Everybody's at home. They're eating ramen noodles. They're getting stimulus checks. Consumers built up a fair amount of savings. Then inflation hits. Then revenge spending hits, because you spend a year and a half locked up. You spend some money. Everything gets more expensive as a result of inflation. Inflation exceeds wage growth, although people have seen decent wage growth in the United States, but inflation definitely exceeded it over the last couple of years. And you say, wow, I've got a 3% mortgage I don't want to give up. I've got a home that's worth a lot more than it used to be because home prices have gone up. I've got some credit card debt now, and I basically paid off my credit card debt with my stimulus checks, and I didn't spend any money during COVID, but now I'm spending money again. I got families going on vacation, whatever it may be. And my credit card debt's costing me 18, 19% a year. I got these guys at Better saying I can borrow $100,000 or $50,000, or, depending on the value of the home and what you're approved for. And I can pay off my credit card debt. I can keep a little bit of cash for some home improvements. I could pay for that next vacation. And that's 9%. And nine's lower than 18. And I've got, a really low LTV on my existing home because I borrowed 80% against the 100,000. The loan's amortized down to 70,000, but the home's now worth 150,000 because the home prices have gone up. And so, like, the math just works for the product. So the industrial logic of the product for the consumer is really high. There's an education component. There's a process component. The good thing about borrowing on a credit card is you just borrow on a credit card. There's not a lot of process to it. Getting a personal loan could be quite easy. And so the people that are going to win in home equity, we think, are people like us who just make the process really efficient through technology. And it doesn't take you, 10 days of emailing documents and stuff back and forth, because there's just a ton of friction in that for something where you're not actually buying the house with the money, but you're paying off other debt. You are comparing us to other sources of raising, funds, borrowing money, either on a credit card or a personal loan or buy now, pay later loan or anything you may be looking at. So it really plays to our hand. Technology first, quick twitch, feels more like a refi to people. And so that's really played well in our hand. But I do think it's the right product for this moment for a lot of consumers, just
Yes.
given
Yeah.
everything I just said.
Sorry to interrupt you there. It's nice to see the discourse surrounding the product change, whether that's increased financial literacy for consumers with some of the numbers or simple math you just said, whether that's messaging around it. It's good. It's good for the industry. And a series of public companies reported results this week in the mortgage sector. They were all pretty positive. And so I'll ask you, do you think that that is a sign that the industry is back on the up, or do you see that it's these larger players are kind of consolidating their market position through technological adoption or advantage? How do you see the landscape continuing to shift as we move into the second half of 2025 here?
Yeah, it's a little of both. It's a little of both. I think they're both great points, Robbie. I think the one thing I will say is people do need to transact, and this kind of locked in place, don't want to give up the 3%, cannot move. You're going to start to see some of that thawing because life just happens for people. That's point one. But to your point of the other public companies, generally the public companies are larger, right? That's not exclusively. If you look at the top 10 originators, more of them are going to be public than your bottom, your 90 to 100 originators by definition. And I think ultimately being in the mortgage reduction business is a scale game. And that's something Better is super focused on. We're a lot smaller than a lot of those other companies. We need to get to scale. We got close during the refi boom. We got up to 58 billion, but they were all refis. We've obviously had to do a lot of work to build out a really strong purchase offering, and we feel like we've done that. But that took a while, and I think the larger companies you're seeing are consolidating share and will consolidate share over time, because if there's 4,000 people providing mortgages in this company, 4,000 businesses, that over time it should be a much smaller number. I don't have a crystal ball on exactly what that number is, but it is a scale game. And the people who can invest in technology have scale, or they have strategic chops and a tech first mindset. We have a tech first mindset, and so we have a huge advantage. And that advantage would be even greater if we actually had scale. So we're on it to get back to scale.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I think you're uniquely positioned in your position as CFO to answer this about the push and pull of appeasing the public or investors, because you're a publicly traded company, with investing in the future and putting in potentially maybe the public doesn't buy into the ROI on some initiatives, kind of that balance that anybody that works at a public company and is in a management or executive role struggles with. How do you deal with what I would say are almost competing, not necessarily mutually exclusive by any stretch, but kind of competing agendas of profit now versus profit later? How do we maximize the shareholder value?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, honestly, it's the hardest part of the job. You just hit literally the hardest part of the job. And so we get we get on with investors, and I understand this. Believe me, I do. The first question is, prove to me that your technology is better than everyone else's. And the second one is, how come you lost money last quarter? And so you're like, okay, well, I got to tackle both of those. I think capital allocation, so I just think about a CFO job, whether it's at Better or any other company, capital allocation is a really important part of running a business, and certainly being heading a finance function in the business. So how much do I want to deploy against the technology relative to the overall ROI? And I think you just got to make the right decision doing your best to get that exact balance which you just articulated, within kind of the right parameters, and then you just got to have conviction in that decision. So we never really pull back on technology spend. Now, our technology budget was bigger in 2021 than it is now. Honestly, we have less engineers, but we feel like the work product is better.
Mm-hmm.
And the industry around us, just given what some of these companies have built on their large language models and things, so our access to use some of that is obviously materially better than it was. That's a global comment. That's not a mortgage specific comment. And so our general view is if it's a high ROI project and we test that, we'll sacrifice this, the short term quarter for that. But what we're really trying to focus on is not wasting money, because it sounds like an obvious statement, but did we really need this vendor in order to accomplish that? Or do we really need to do this? Or was that marketing channel really worth it? If we can stay disciplined on those things, that gives you a little more flexibility to build out, kind of a CapEx budget, which is ultimately what we're doing. Like we think Tin Man is the most valuable asset at the corporation. It is more than any financial asset. The technology itself is the most valuable asset. We built it all ourselves.
I think a lot of the industry is dealing with that right now, where a couple years ago there's all this tech and it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. What vendor should I use? Should I adopt multiple systems that do the same thing just so we have it in house? And now it's kind of like, what can I pare back, or what can I properly train my team on to get the best ROI to maximize its use and its benefits? So it's nice to hear you echo that. I want to close with this, and it's kind of on the focus to win business going forward here. You mentioned earlier in this interview building out a strong purchase offering. You mentioned the strategic ops, kind of this tech mindset you'll have. But when it comes to winning business, and we've seen across the industry really large players this year work on the start of the funnel all the way to the end, whether that's getting leads in the door through realtor relationships, or whether that's recapture with servicing books and those sorts of things. What is Better's focus to win business as we move into the second half of the year?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. We're trying to spend a lot more time on building partnerships with and around the industry, software as a service, software plus fulfillment, lead gen relationships where our customer acquisition costs are either zero or a fixed amount through people with great customer bases. That's one strain. And then our direct to consumer business, which is really, we're sourcing customers, SEO, performance marketing, just like a lot of other people. It is using the technology to get people pre-approved instantly, which we've done. Promise them, that all in 24 hours. One day mortgage is a huge offering. It's just trying to provide a best in class product. The ultimate product, the 30-year conforming mortgage, is the same product we're going to have that everybody else has. But what I mean product, like way they actually source that mortgage to the best of our ability, so that we can convert better through that funnel that you just mentioned, or the leads that come through our website, the pre-approvals we generate each year would suggest that we'd have a lot more funded loans than we do. And so that is the core focus of our D2C business, is get more people from the top of the funnel to the bottom. Now you'll say everybody says that, but we think we're superior at the top of the funnel right now. And we just got to keep doing the work to get people to lock and then ultimately to fund.
What I heard was we're moving from better to best, and that's exciting. And I'm smiling over here while I say that. I appreciate you making the time, especially on short notice, right after these results came out. Always a pleasure talking to you. So hopefully we'll have you back on soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Robbie. Thank you for the time.
This week brings the release of a few noteworthy reports, including July CPI, PPI, retail sales, and industrial production. Fed speak is limited. And I should say that the Federal Reserve is in a precarious position this week, as it balances the competing pressures of rising inflation due to tariffs and a softening labor market. With markets fully pricing in a September rate cut, this week's inflation data will be critical in determining the Fed's next move. While tariff-related price increases in goods are expected, the key question is whether these will remain isolated or spread to other sectors. The Fed's willingness to prioritize a weakening employment outlook over these inflationary pressures will be a central theme, with the market's bullish outlook on Treasury yields suggesting a belief that the Fed will lean more toward a dovish stance, potentially confirming a rate cut at the upcoming Jackson Hole Symposium. With nothing of note on today's economic calendar, the week begins with agency MBS prices, a little change from Friday's close, the 2-year yielding 3.76, and the 10-year yielding 4.27 after closing last week at 4.29%. Let's wrap up with a joke and some housekeeping. A man was driving down a peaceful country road when he suddenly lost control of his car and ended up in a ditch. Frustrated but unharmed, he walked to a nearby farmhouse to ask for help. The farmer listened to his story, nodded, and said, "Don't worry, I'll get you out." He grabbed his rope and led his old horse to the scene. At the ditch, the farmer tied the rope to the car and stood beside his horse. "Pull, Zoomer, pull!" he called out, but the horse didn't move. "Pull, Radar, pull!" the farmer shouted, but the horse stood still. "Pull, Dasher, pull!" the farmer yelled, yet the horse didn't budge. Finally, the farmer called out, "Pull, Dusty, pull!" At this, the horse leaned into the harness and effortlessly dragged the car out of the ditch. The man was stunned. "Why'd you call your horse by different names?" he asked. The farmer chuckled. "Dusty's blind. If he thought he was pulling alone, he wouldn't have tried." Thanks again to ICE for sponsoring today's podcast. By seamlessly integrating best-in-class solutions, ICE optimizes every stage of the loan life cycle, setting the standard for innovation, artificial intelligence, efficiency, and scalability, and defining the future of homeownership.